Hi there, and welcome to this second lesson in this series of tutorials where we're going to learn how to animate a bouncing ball and use some of the tools associated with animating in Autodesk Maya. So one of the important things that we need to think about when using Maya is our use of timing and spacing, which is the most basic principle of any kind of performance. If you don't get the timing and spacing right early on, that can cause problems further down the line. And if we look at our animation at the moment, ignoring the weighting issues, it's hard to really tell whether our timing and spacing is running very smoothly or very accurate. And there is a reason for this, and we're going to be discovering that in today's lesson. Okay, so our lesson today is going to be using the graph editor, okay? Or you may hear me refer to this as the curve editor because we work with curves, as you'll see in a second. But again, it is known as the graph editor. So to open the graph editor, we're going to go to our Windows, go down to Animation Editors, and go to the graph editor, which will bring it up in a pop-out box like this, which is fine. And as you can see, we've selected our object. Our bouncing ball appears here in our graph editor outliner, and you can see we have each of our curves that we've selected for our animation. Okay, so before we begin, this is very distracting. This makes it very difficult to navigate. So if I select change our interface to have the perspective and the graph editor, which is this one here, you'll see for some reason it hasn't appeared here. We have our object. Now the reason for this is because we have our window of the graph editor open. Okay, so if we close this off, select it again, and you'll see it has now changed. Okay, before we begin, I do want to change our scene back. So if you remember, Alt or Command and left mouse button click and drag is to move the viewport around. If we hold the middle mouse button, we can slide it left and right. What we want to do is push F, get it central, just so it's nice and tidy for when we go back to perspective. But we're going to go to Panel, Orthographic, and I think we're working in front view. Yeah, there we go. So again, Command or Alt, middle mouse button, drag, and we can reposition our ball. Okay, so if we push play now, we can see it's moving along our screen. Okay, now what's happening here is the weighting of this movement is very awkward, and this is to do with the animation principle of easing in and easing out. Objects, when they lose momentum or within movement, especially humans when they swing their arms, for example, will slowly pull out of, slowly go into a movement, speed up, and then go really fast, and then ease out again where they ease back in where the gravity meets, and they'll do the same thing back. They'll speed up and then ease out. If you imagine a swing, a child on a swing in a park or an adult on a swing in a park, doesn't really matter. As it hits the high points, you will see that it slows up and slows out, but then when it builds momentum and drops down, it will go really fast, and that is known as easing in and easing out. And essentially the curves are built like that naturally within Maya. So what this means is we've set our timings. Okay, our timings of these values here from 1 to 10 to 20 to 30 to 40. The timings are when the bounces or when the maximum height happen. Okay, so the maximum height or the maximum lowest point, if we look at transform Y, all of these points are basically our timing. Okay, these are our timings. This is when they happen. Spacing, in addition to timing, is everything in between. Okay, now at the moment what this curve tells us is that the distribution of time and space, and the increase in value is not equal. Okay, which if I quickly create an editable motion trail, as we'll look at next week, you'll see that we have this weird curve. Okay, we don't want this. This has got really weird warping, and you can see, we travel a lot less distance here on translate X. So as we move across, we ease out, and as we get to the middle, our space movement over time is more equally distributed before easing back in. Okay, we don't want this. This is not how we want our ball to move. So I'm just going to undo the editable motion trail, and I'm going to click with my left mouse button and drag. So hold it down and drag, and select these vertices, these keyframes. Now, by default, my use is flat tangents, which you can see here. These tangents are flat. Okay, we can rotate these around, as you can see, and change that. But we want to retain as much control as possible, and by default they are flat. But we want them to be linear, which means that they are straight, they are equal. So every time it moves forward, it's moving forward by an equal value. So every frame increases by the same amount of distance. Okay, moving across, and hopefully, as we can see now, we've got a much more equal distribution of space over time, which is great. Okay, that's exactly what we want. We want it to be moving at an equal pace. What we're going to say here actually is that at the end, where it loses momentum, you can see the distance is equal at this point. But actually, as we go over time, it's going to lose that momentum. It's going to lose that distance that it's travelling. So we're actually going to select this last vertex, this last keyframe, and we're going to take that back to a linear tangent again. So we actually do want it to ease out of the movement. Okay, we want it to ease up and slow up over time. So we just play that again. We can see that it's just easing out at the end. It's slowing down, it's slowing up, which is exactly what would happen in real life. The ball would lose power, it would lose momentum, and would therefore slow down. So we are going to be using a mixture of linear and flat tangent. So linear would be our curve here going straight out, and this one here is our flat. As you can see, it's flat. Okay. So you've already started learning and using the graph editor, which is an absolutely essential tool in animation, and to be getting this in so early on is a really big step. Okay, so be proud and be glad that you're here and doing this with us at this stage. So the translate Y, it gives us a slightly different proposition. So what's happening when a ball bounces is a fight between the energy of the object that has thrown it and gravity. Now, gravity gives it energy but also takes it away. Okay, and I'm going to demonstrate that. So you imagine you're throwing a ball and it drops and it hits the floor, and all that momentum is pushing it down. As it hits the ground, a reaction happens where all the energy comes in, the ball will compress depending on what material it's made out of, and it will push back, it will react, okay, and it will rise up. Now as the ball rises, something interesting happens. Its energy dwindles, okay, its energy runs out, and so gravity, which is a constant pull, will start to pull back. It will start to take over and take control of that pull and start to put it back down. And so gravity then acts as the energy, giving the energy to the ball. And as the ball falls again, it compresses again, it bounces back out, and the same thing happens. And eventually, gravity will win as that momentum runs and runs out. Eventually, there is no more energy left, and the ball will just stop where it is. So, what happens is we want flat tangents in the air. We want that ease in and ease out. We want to feel that battle between gravity and the energy of the ball as it runs out. So the flat tangents work because it eases in and eases out. It's that battle, it's that slow change between one and the other. But on the ground, as we have at the moment, we have that ease in and ease out there present, and we can see because we have a flat tangent, so we know it's going to ease in and ease out with that flat tangent, and we don't want that. We don't want it to be hitting the ground and happening and basically lingering down there, because it doesn't. As soon as it hits the ground, that energy reacts and it's straight back in the air. So we're going to take these bottom vertexes by left mouse button, select, click and drag, and we're going to select all the bottom ones. We don't want any of the top ones, and we're going to change these to flat tangents. Well, sorry, not flat tangents, I apologise, linear tangents. And hopefully when we bounce the ball now, we will see a much more natural reaction. Okay, it's staying on the ground, it's staying in the air for a longer amount of time than it is on the ground, because obviously it's fighting gravity. Okay, so we've started to get our bounce lined up, and I'm feeling kind of happy with that. And you know, depending on the type of ball you are going to animate will indicate whether it's like a ping pong ball where there are a lot of bounces and it happens very fast, or whether it's a bowling ball where it's very heavy and it has very few bounces, and you know, it decreases in energy very quickly because the weight of the object just will win that battle every time. So what else are we going to do? So we have our bounce, we've set our curves, and we are kind of happy with those. And I think it's really important that we keep practicing with these. So it might be worth at this point playing around with some other values, adding some more parts in, maybe extending this roll at the end out. So yeah, let's extend this roll out. I think that's going to be yeah, let's do it. Right, so we have our curves, we have our change over time. I'm going to take this up to, I'm going to add another 2 seconds, I think. So I'm going to change my time slider, my range slider, sorry, to 150. Okay, so we're increasing this by 2 seconds, and I'm going to go up to 150, and I'm going to take this value here, so we're at 20 there. I'm going to take that to, I don't know, let's say 25. Let's see how that looks. Okay, and I'm going to actually delete this keyframe here. Okay, so we're now travelling over a much bigger time frame, and yeah, so I do like to do little sound effects as it goes up and down. So yeah, okay, so we can see that feel that roll happening there, but I'm not happy with how fast that's happening. I mean, these bounces have really slowed down now as a result. So I'm actually gonna go to here, and I mean, yeah, we're gonna increase, we're gonna take this back up to 20 here, I think. Key select, and hopefully I'll just bring some of that energy back. Yeah, okay. So right, so we're going to tweak this. We're going to tweak it. So what's happening as we go down? When we get to this point here, this last bounce, it's a long time in the air for that one little bounce, and so really that should be happening with with a shorter amount of timing. Okay, it should be it shouldn't take 20 frames for that little bounce to happen. So when we start decreasing our energy for the last two bounces, we're going to actually take these down. We want these to be smaller, we want them to be shorter. So I'm going to actually do this in the graph editor. I'm going to explain how. So select your single frame, and if you hold shift, make sure you have the transform tool selected by pushing W. Okay, and if you hold shift, push the middle mouse button in and drag to the left, you'll be able to flick that between each of these frames, and I want that on 55, and you can see down here where that is. Okay, I'm actually gonna, in fact actually we'll do 56, we'll keep it at 6 frames, and I'm going to do the same with this one. I'm going to take that to 6 frames after 56, which will take us to 62, and then with our last bounce we're going to take this to we're going to take that to be like 4 frames, so 66, and we're going to take the last one again to 70 as a result of that. So yeah, there we go, 70, As you can see here, we can see now that those keyframes have changed, and if we start bouncing that, okay, we get a nice bit of feeling at the end where that energy runs out. So it's going to watch that again and again. You'll find as you animate, you'll be watching and watching and watching your animations, re-watching them back, reanalyzing every little piece to make sure that bounce is right. Okay, so yeah, I think actually we can probably speed up. So we've done the last two. I think we can speed this one up as well. Even if we just take it in by 2 frames, it will feel as though it will speed up. So again, if you want to move across the viewport, just push Alt and middle mouse button and drag the same as you would in this viewport here. Okay, it's exactly the same process. But if we want to move this across, we push Shift. I'm just going to move that down 2 frames, and I'm going to move that down 2 frames, and 2 more again, because obviously we want to deduce the space in here, and the space in here, and the time in here, and the time in this side by 2. So we're moving them back 4 overall. So to move that back by 2, move that back by 4, and then we're going to move all of these back by 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and now we should have a nice bounce. And actually, yeah. Okay, cool. I'm quite happy with that. I think the bounce could be a little bit faster, but at this point I think what we want to do is just keep it a bit slower. Obviously you're learning. I want you to be able to feel some of the other principles that we apply as we're going to in some of the later sessions. So we now have that happening. I just want to check the timing of that overall roll at the end, make sure I'm happy with it. I'm actually starting to wonder now if we could add an extra little jump in at the end there. So let's try it. So I'm going to go back through. I'm going to go to here. I know these are 4 frames in between, and I'm actually going to add. I'm going to do 2 frames. I think we'll just have like a little jump right there. So we'll go to our translate Y. Type in 0.5. Key selected, and go back to 70. Type in 0, take it back down, right click on the word, translate Y, and keep key selected, and I'm going to go back in. I'm going to change the curves because by default they're on flats. We don't want them on flat tangents, not well, we do at the top but not at the bottom. So again, I'm going to change that to a linear tangent. So let's take a look at that now. So we take it back to 1, go back to our playback down here. Yeah, I think that adds to it. I think that just that little extra bounce makes a little bit of difference. Okay, you can see it's getting a bit laggy there. Let's go again. Yeah, okay, I'm happy with that. Cool. So, and now obviously because it's not selected, we don't really notice that it's not rolling. It kind of our imagination kind of puts that in. So we've got our bounce. We've fixed our tangents using the graph editor. We're using a mixture of linear and flat tangents. Now, one thing I'd like to point out, and this is really important because I've seen this quite a lot, is that we don't need to set a keyframe every time we move forward. So I've seen people go, yeah, I'm going to put a keyframe here, I'm going to move along again, I'm going to key both of these channels, because what actually happens is by default this happens, okay, and people have ended up with really weird animations because they've keyframed every step that they've done in both channels, and so they end up with this really weird jump. So can you make sure that you only keyframe 1 channel at a time? Okay, I'm just going to remove those. So in this lesson we've looked at the graph editor, very basically looked at our 2 channels and how they're represented visually. We've used flat tangents, which are made as by default, which creates easing in and easing out, sometimes in places where we do not want it, such as the bottom of the bounce and obviously our initial distance travelling across. We've used our linear tangents to offset that and actually improve those bounces as it hits the ground and comes across. And we've also been manipulating where the keyframe positions are within the graph editor, as opposed to having to reset them or retype them or rekey them. and we've added more on because we've analysed our animation, we've analysed how well that ball bounces, and as I said, I felt that we needed that extra bounce, and I think we're sort of we're almost there. I think at the beginning it could be a little bit faster, so we may tweak that again later. But overall, I think we're doing okay. So our timing and spacing has been manipulated, our easing in and easing out has been manipulated, and in the next lesson we're going to look at editable motion trails, and we're also going to look at adding some squash and stretch. Okay, so I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson. So thanks for watching.